next presenter is Teri Effle. She's currently the director of the Childcare Family Resources at Lincoln Berean Church. And after receiving her bachelor's degree in family science at UNL, she spent 12 years working in nonprofit as a program director, community organizer, and a grant writer for the Lincoln Council on Alcoholism and Drugs. Now she's working her passion, working alongside kids and families. And she is going to talk to us about the current state of alcohol use among Nebraska's youth. So please welcome Teri Effle.
Well, welcome, and I am super glad to be here to talk to you guys today. Prevention has always been my passion. I'll unpack my story a little bit as I kind of visit with you today about the state of alcohol in Nebraska. It was kind of fun to dig back into that after a while of being out of it, maybe literally and figuratively. But when I was grant writing, I kind of lived and breathed this stuff and could have quoted you chapter and verse the statistics, particularly in Lancaster County, which is where I was working for. And so when I had Region 5 kind of feed me some of the most recent data, it was fun to kind of dig back in and see what's changed in the 5.5 years since I've been out. So I'll share some of that with you guys. Laura's passing out a little quiz. I want to see how well. So none of you are allowed to Google the answers. Oh, thank you. My gosh, you're so good. Do not spill. I cannot even today. So does everybody have the little half sheet of paper? If I catch you Googling, remember I work for a church, bad juju. All right, so you can do this as a table. So good for you if you're sitting with a great big table of people. You can totally cheat with each other. And I want you to answer the questions to the best of your ability. Don't think too long. I just want you to kind of, because a lot of them are percentages, I just want you to throw out there kind of what you think the current state is, and then we'll sort of go over that in review and see how you did and how close you got.
Is this for Nebraska?
This is for Nebraska. Yep, we did statewide. Okay. I will sort of give you a caveat. Oh, I'm outside of the camera. I'm being naughty. I have 2 lavalier mics on, but it's not enough. I have to stay close to the podium. And to say that I had some data from 2012, and then I have a bootlegged copy of data from 2014, so I hung closer to the 2012 so I wouldn't get in trouble, so that's where most of this is from, the Nebraska Risk and Protective Factor Survey data. So for number 1, in the last 30 days, what percentage of 8th graders tried alcohol? What's your guess? Or not guess, depending. 15? What'd you say?
25.
25? What else?
20.
30. You all are awfully quiet. What do you think? 6.3.
Wow.
Nebraska 8th graders are angels, clearly. Everybody's laughing who's working with the Nebraska 8th graders. They're like, no, my 8th graders. I don't know what 8th graders you're surveying. How about the 12th graders? 50 or 15? 15? 40? 30? 60? 31.4%. So somebody over here got awfully close. Nice job. Oh, number 2. Where do most 12th graders get their alcohol? Peers and friends, older siblings. What else? Their parents. Oh, gosh. Well, it might be. Most 12th graders, according to the survey data, got their alcohol at someone else's home without the parents' permission. Like, that was how specific the data was. So how about most 6th graders? Home with their parents' permission. So my suspicion is, and now I'm guessing, so you can string me up for this later, but my suspicion is that that probably follows some kind of tradition because the percentage is so low of kids who are using that probably was at some kind of function, or it was some kind of holiday, or some other thing that meant something for the family. Now, that's not true across the board, that there was probably football parties, which I get our tradition, I know where I live, but that there were probably things like that where it was probably, yep, you can have one, and it was a less big deal than, you know, they were filling up a red Solo cup with Jim Beam and knocking it back. I have a feeling that it looked a little bit different from that, but yeah, that was in their home with their parents' permission. So number 3, what percentage of students in Nebraska would say that our state laws and norms are favorable to drug use? What percentage would say that our laws and norms are favorable to drug use? 40? 35? Huh? 90? 60? 30? 51.5. We're close. Huh? Somebody asked a great question. So said, what exactly does that mean? So the question is sort of, so there's a flight of questions that sort of get at this idea. It's a risk and protective factor thing where they're trying to delve into, there's a set of questions, there's sort of community risk and protective factor, and a set of questions that are peer risk and protective factor. And they're saying, does your community favor or are they okay with drug and alcohol use? And so there's sort of a flight of questions that get at that for community and a flight of questions that get at that for, I think they straight up ask, if I remember correctly from seeing the survey 1,000 years ago, that they straight up ask that, but then they ask some other questions that kind of get at that as well, so that kids can't sandbag and say, well, yes, of course, or it would be 90 if that were the case. There would be kids who would answer that way. What is the average age of first use of alcohol for youth in Nebraska?
11.5.
Oh, my word. 11.5.
12. 16. 13.
Oh no, now it's getting serious. Somebody Googled it. So here's the deal. The information I found was old, and then when I was unpacking the data that I had, it was the way that they listed it off was confusing. So I did a little bit of extra research, which was sort of fun and took me back to my grant writing days. So here's the deal. And this isn't necessarily strictly for Nebraska, but kind of nationwide. What they were saying, if you look at students 12 to 17, then the average age is about 13. If you look at students 12 to 20, the average age goes up to 16. So it's not as clear cut necessarily as it seemed, years and years ago. And what was awesome when I was looking at our data, the Nebraska data, 1 in 8 kids said they had their first drink before the age of 13. In 1991, that was 1 in 3. So definitely we have been heading in the right direction in a big way with that number. So I was excited to see that. And then overall, would you say that the underage drinking problem in Nebraska has improved or gotten worse? So let's do a little normative thing here. If you think that overall the underage drinking problem in Nebraska has gotten better, so we're headed in the right direction, raise your hand. Okay, put your hand down. If you would say overall that the underage drinking problem in Nebraska has gotten worse, raise your hand. Okay, well, it probably has something to do with what people are doing for a living, I would say. Well, I'm for serious and what you do and what you see. In 1991, 53.4% of our young people had tried alcohol or had had alcohol in the last 30 days. In 2013, that number was 22.1. In 1991, the number of young people who had binge drank in the last 30 days was 36.9. In 2013, that number was 13.6. So give yourself a round of applause in all seriousness, because that has gone way in the right direction over the last, that's a lot of math to do all in my head, but 20-something years. We have definitely been heading in the right direction. So I want to show you a little bit of a video here, and here's where you're going to be like, oh yeah, she has definitely gone into ministry. Because I'm going to kind of unpack for you a little bit. Here's why, when I heard there was a marijuana talk going on right before the alcohol talk, I thought, oh my word, that is going to be a tough act to follow. Alcohol is such a tough thing to talk about because we have a bizarre relationship with drinking in our culture. And probably that's true in every culture, but America seems to have a particularly dysfunctional relationship with alcohol, like just across the board. We're weird with it. And so I want to show you a little bit of a video and then kind of unpack a little bit why I think that is, and share with you some of my experience kind of throughout my sort of short career and kind of how that's changed over the last couple of years and what we're looking at. We don't know if this video is going to have sound or not. It's just music, so if it doesn't have sound, you're not missing a ton. But I'll move on from there. So I want you to think about time with me for the next little while as we talk. I think that time is the great denominator when we talk about prevention, and that's only become a lot more clear to me in the last 5 years as I've stepped from prevention, where I was sort of in a macro role. I started in micro, working with kids and doing children of like COA, children of alcoholics groups in schools in Lincoln. That's where I started, into kind of a more macro role where I was doing community organizing, and then heaven help us all, I was a grant writer, where I have no idea. They said, here, write this, and I was like, okay. And so I did, and we got them, and I was like, are you for serious? And then you get, I mean, has anybody ever done that? You write a grant, and then you get it, and you're like, who wrote this? Who said we would do this? Are you kidding me? I didn't think we'd actually get it, and we'd have to do the stuff we said we would do. So moving from micro to macro taught me a lot about what we were actually trying to do in our community and what that was actually supposed to look like, and actually tackling, instead of tackling just, you know, small little microcosms of kids and kids one-on-one, trying to change the environment that we lived in, and, you know, what a brick wall sometimes that felt like, because really it is so hard to turn that ship around. It's like trying to raise the Titanic with tweezers, is what I was finally saying, you know, toward the end of my career, and everybody would just kind of go, yeah, that's the truth. I mean, it really is kind of a frustrating thing, and then to step back again and to move into ministry, where once again you move back into micro. So I really did sort of get whiplash from that. And I moved into a program called Celebrate Recovery, which is a faith-based recovery program. I run the kids side of that, called Celebration Station. Now it's called Celebration Place, because apparently there's a theme park called Celebration Station, and they didn't want to share their name with us. So every Friday night for 5 years, we showed up and ran a 3-hour program with children who came with their parents who were attending the adult side, the Celebrate Recovery side, and we would do this individual targeted program with young people. And we ran through the same program 5 years in a row, and we had most of the same kids for 5 years in a row prior to, and we just ended, and I just stepped out of that role the week before Thanksgiving was our last week. And it's killing me because all of those kids are attenders at our church. And so now they're putting the screws to me because every time they see me, they're like, when are you coming back? Like, they just get these super sad faces because they still have people there. It's just not me. And I'm like, you're not having any effect on me. And then I go to my office and cry because they're totally having an effect on me. When are you coming back? And when are you going to come back and start the program again? And that's so interesting to me, because all they would do when we would show up to run the program is say, can we have an off night tonight? Can we watch a movie tonight? Can we do anything but the program tonight? And so it's interesting to me that now they're like, can you please come back and do the program? I'm like, all you're doing is having an off night. You people don't know what you want. And so interesting and curious to me, but what I think I'm hearing them say is what we want is you guys. What we want is our program people to come back. And I don't even think they really want the program people to come back. I think what they want is the people that have the relationships with them to come back. And I thought, oh, that is so telling and so convicting. And so it all kind of gets back to this idea of time. From the time a child is born until the time they turn 18, you have 936 weeks. Reggie Joyner, who's with a group called Orange, has made the saddest jar ever. They use marbles, which speaks to me. This is 936 marbles. And I love that because they're shiny and I like everything that's shiny. So we immediately, after we saw this, went out and bought a really inordinate number of marbles, and they're all on my desk, and did this jar. And so this represents the number of weeks you have in a child's life from the time they're born until the time they move on to whatever's next. So how many of you in here are parents? Raise your hands, raise them high, whether you have kids at home or not. Oh yes, so this is going to be the saddest jar ever. So when we were at this conference, I was like, that's a great visual. Like that's really, that's powerful stuff. And so when we left his session, you can have the big jar. When we left his session and went out to, where they're selling all the swag that they always sell at those conferences, we started to see lots and lots of jars. And next to all these jars, there were little cards that said 8 years old, 4 years old, 14 years old, 17 years old. And so we got to one that said 13 years old. And what do you think I had at home at the time? A 13-year-old son. We have one son. He's now 14 years old, by the grace of God. This is his jar. So this is really the saddest jar, right? That's my face all the time. I used to have this jar at home, and my husband, who also works at Berean, because that's how Berean is, like it just sort of sucks you all in, was like, you need to take that to work, because I cannot even look at that every single day. And every Sunday morning, I take a marble out and I put it in the big jar on my desk. And it is the most impactful, strange, and weird thing to watch the time disappear. So as a parent, this is sort of traumatizing because you really, the time just kind of slips through your fingers. You have no idea really how fast that goes. But for anybody who's in leadership, anybody who does micro work, we use this in our setting. It's for Sunday school teachers. We say Sunday school teachers have about 40 hours. So they get a tiny little mason jar with 40 marbles in it. And when we train them, we say, really, in a year, this is how many hours you have to impact a kid's life. 40. That's all you've got. And you can take one out. This year we gave them gumballs. And I was like, for serious, only eat one a week. If I come back and you're down to 3, I'm going to know it was a bad week. And you were eating all the gumballs. But one a week, take one out and get rid of it. And just know that that's your time counting down. Because time is the great denominator. And everything happens in the context of time. And I think it's interesting to me when we talk about prevention and what does this look like, and particularly when we talk about the context of alcohol, why it's so difficult. Let's unpack for just a second what happens when kids start to drink. How many of you have ever seen the website Reasons Why My Kid is Crying? Anybody? We have one person up here, a couple people. Okay, if you've not seen it, not right now because you'll quit listening to me, at lunch, well, not at lunch because Jerome's giving you a tour. Okay, at some point on your break, you need to look up the blog, Reasons Why My Kid is Crying. It started with a guy who now his kid's probably like 4, but at the time his kid was 2. And he was kind of walking through this whole thing about the terrible twos and why it's so hard. And he just takes pictures of the reasons and posts little captions that are hilarious of why his kid is crying. My kid is crying because the balloon fell on the floor behind him, and he's sitting on the floor. Like, he could easily reach back and get it. My kid is crying because his cheese broke in half. My kid is crying because, whatever, I wouldn't let him lick the dog. My kid is crying because, it's all these different reasons. My suspicion is, if we unpack the reasons why teens drink, it would look a lot like reasons why my kid is crying. Like, the reasons are huge and varied and almost sometimes nonsensical. Sometimes they follow a really clear pattern, like it's cyclical. Like, you can look back at the family and go, well, that's not a humongous surprise to anybody why this is happening, because somebody packed those bags for them and they're just continuing on the road that somebody else put them on. But sometimes it makes a lot less sense. Like, you think they have everything going for them, everything going for them. Why on earth are they choosing to do this? So here's sort of what it looks like. It's a combination of genes and environment. This is no surprise. Any of you who've taken a development class will know this. So biologically and physiologically, what's happening in adolescence makes them, a lot of kids, more prone to risk-taking and poor decision-making. Yes? Nobody is surprised. Any of you who have a teenager are like, amen, always. So they're more prone to risk-taking behavior, which puts them more at risk to early experimentation with alcohol. And by early experimentation, I mean prior to being 21, like breaking the law. So they have an early experimentation, they have an early interaction with alcohol, and that looks like whatever it is. But if they continue with that experimentation, then it begins to kind of shape their environment. Because now all of a sudden they're choosing friends and they're choosing situations that support further drinking, because now all of a sudden, well, they hang out with friends who drink, or that's what they do on Friday night, and so that it sort of begins to sort of mold and shape the path that they're on. Like, this is just kind of what we're going to do. I'm not necessarily talking dependence, I'm just talking, well, this is what we do. And if you live in a small town, that's what you say. If you live in Lincoln, that's what you say. I remember we went with Region 5. Did we go to Ohio, or we were in Minnesota? We were somewhere. We were in some big old city, and we had a group of youth with us, and we had seen a group of youth who were from there, and they were like, this town is so boring. And the kids from Lincoln were like, us too. And the adults were like, are you serious? And I thought, you're hosing us. Like, if there's nothing to do here, there's nothing to do anywhere. It's the biggest excuse ever told. Like, I just don't think there's anything to do anywhere. It just depends on where you are. It's boring there if you're 15, 16, 17, because you've done it all. You've just seen it all and done it all, and there's nothing to do. So if I'm drinking, that shapes my environment. My friends are probably drinking, because it's really awkward if I have a lot of friends who aren't drinking, so I'm going to kind of heel to those friends who are drinking. I pick situations where we're probably going to be drinking, and that begins to shape the environment that I'm comfortable in. And then everything I'm used to becomes connected to my drinking. And I'm not talking dependence, I'm just talking like that's what I start to look forward to. Those are the stories I'm hearing on Monday morning. I mean, it starts to become the norm for me. And if you think about kids who are 15, 16, 17 years old, sometimes older, sometimes younger, what's the norm is what they become really invested in, and that becomes what they kind of cling to. So the educators in the room, how easy is it for a kid to just switch groups? How easy is it for a band kid to just up and go sit with the wrestling team if he's not a wrestler? Some kids could do it. Some real precocious kids could do it, but the average clarinet player is not going to be like, I am going to go sit with the heavyweights today. Like, it just doesn't happen. And they would tell you, well, you're just simply crazy. Those are not my people. Like, I don't sit with them. And I'm going to stay over here and you can go away, you crazy person. Like, they just don't do it unless that's their tribe, unless they also are a wrestler or they know a wrestler. Then all of a sudden it's okay. But if they don't switch. So if kids hang out with kids who are drinking and that's become my environment because that's what's been shaped by my behavior, then I'm not going to be able to easily switch. Sometimes it happens naturally, and we have all maybe witnessed that. Educators have seen it. If you're a parent, maybe you've watched it, which is sometimes painful and sometimes great, depending on what your situation is. All of a sudden, a kid will kind of switch friend groups, like old friends kind of fall away and they make a whole set of new friends and everything just kind of changes. That's high school, and it's normal, and sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, but it doesn't always mean negativity. So sometimes it will happen that those things will just kind of drift apart, but usually once it's set, it's kind of set. And to just say, well, just change, they just look at you like, I got nothing. I have no idea what you're asking me to do. So if they continue on like that, then there will be further kind of physiological and psychological changes. And then you'll start to see things like depression, anxiety. You'll start to see the things that get kids skipped. Like that's when people start calling in and putting them through the SCIP process, or parents will start to call and be concerned, or their grades will drop. Those kinds of things will start to show up, and now we're flirting with there are harms. And that's assuming they're not driving, that's assuming they're not riding in a car with a drinking driver, that's assuming that they're not involved with, sexual activity that's not sanctioned, that they've not sanctioned. That's assuming that none of that is taking place. Sorry. Is that you, Mother? I don't even know what that is. So all of that happens. All of that can happen. Like it follows. It's very strange. It was my own hair. This is what you're dealing with. So all of that happens. What's the context? Does it happen overnight? No. What's the context? Time. The context is time. So why do we think, and by we, I'm not saying you necessarily, but why do we as a culture think that we're going to be able to fix that with a one and out? Why do we think that bringing in a presenter? Why do we think that putting through an 8-week program? Why do we think that launching or doing this one thing is going to be enough? Because if I have no problem, bring in a wrecked car, on you go. They park that thing, because we live off of O Street, 27th and O. They park that wrecked car in the Easy Go lot every year. And I don't mind, because every time it's there, because remember I have a 14-year-old son who will, God help you all, be a 15-year-old son in July, run for your lives. Every time we drive by it, I'm like, well, how do you think that car got wrecked? So we have that conversation when we drive by it. I don't think that's necessarily what's happening. Because remember, I'm a crazy person who grew up in the prevention world. And not only am I, my husband is too. So Dawson's like, I'm not going to drink because you would kill my face. I'm like, good job. You've been listening. And that doesn't mean that it's a done deal. But we have that conversation all the time. So why, as a culture, have we decided that, these little things will be the things that change a kid's mind? Like, I'm just convinced at 41 that we've kind of missed the boat. And I'm thinking that the solution is both more complicated and simpler than we've made it. And you can feel free to boo me off stage if you think I'm full of it, but here's what I think. How many of you have had contact with the 40 developmental assets? Okay, well, I'm not going to unpack it for you. You can look it up, and I've not had contact with it for a little bit of time, so there are experts in the room who've had it way more recently than I have. But the Orange Group, the reason I am so fond of it is because it heals very closely to the assets and resiliency stuff that I had a lot of contact with when I was in the prevention world. And he talks about 6 things in the context of time that he thinks are important for kids. So I want to kind of share that with you and share why I think it matters in terms of alcohol prevention. And why I think what I see in terms of raising a teenager today, and in terms of the 6,000 families that come through our doors every week, and the contact I have with trying to help people, connect them with benevolence help and those kinds of things. That's my work in ministry at Berean. Why I feel like this is probably why I think they're onto something here. And why I think it all happens in the context of time. The first one is just simply time over time. And why he says that's important is because it takes time over time to create a history worth repeating. And that's exactly what we were just talking about. Like, so how a kid slides into that kind of drinking culture happens over a period of time. How a kid understands that we care enough about them to want something different for them happens over a period of time. And we are busy. I get it. You're busy in nonprofit. You're busy, God bless you, those of you who are educators, you are busy half to death with all of the stuff you have to do. If you're in treatment or mental health, I get it. I mean, you're just buried in paperwork and all of that stuff. We have to figure out a way to figure out how to give some of our time to kids. We've got to figure out a way to carve out some of that stuff for them. Why it matters here is because there are some things that cannot be learned in a moment. Drinking culture can't be learned in a moment, obviously. We just talked about that. So here are some other things that don't get picked up in a moment. Manners. How many of you have little kids? Right? Oh, the hands flew up like, yes, I have little kids. How many times have you told them to say please or thank you? Like a zillion, right? Right. And like a zillion more. Like it never stops. But I will tell you that they're saying please and thank you when they're not with you. They just don't do it when they're with you because they're torturing you. That's why they do it. So manners, not learned in a second. Healthy eating habits. We're on a journey toward kind of changing our eating habits at our house. And I will tell you that we've been doing this for a year and a half now, and I am still waiting to prefer broccoli over donuts. Everybody keeps telling me, oh yeah, eventually you won't even want that stuff. Biggest lie ever told. Nope. Or they're like, you'll prefer mashed broccoli or mashed cauliflower to potatoes. Biggest lie ever told. I'm like, that's not bread. That's not bread, that's cauliflower, and it's good, but it's not bread. So not learned in a day, I'm discovering to my peril and sorrow. Faith, culture, morals, and values, none of that stuff is picked up in a minute. You can learn a soundbite that you like and that you can kind of regurgitate. Here's an example. Do we have any coaches in here? Anyone who coaches? What do you coach? Basketball. God bless you. And what? And tennis? Okay, so let's pick on basketball for a second. How long do you spend, is it girls or boys? Oh, okay. Well, there you go. How long do you spend putting in plays? Like, so when you get a group of girls at the very beginning of the season, how long do you spend putting in plays and all of that jazz?
Approximately 2.5 hours a day. So.
2.5 hours a day. Forever, I'm assuming, until you have your first game. Do you ever feel ready?
No.
Never feel ready. Right, and so you have your season, and I'm assuming, it looks like whatever it looks like. Of course, brilliant, because how could it be anything else? And so at the end of the season, so say, when does basketball, is it over? It just ended, didn't it?
March gets over first week of March.
Okay, so if at the end of May, we pulled your girls back together and put them against the UNL team for fun, how do you think they'd do if you had no time to
Not very well conditioned. They would not be in very good basketball condition.
Exactly. Right. So you can, for 2.5 hours a day, ramrod plays, and these are athletes. They want to play. I'm assuming they most of the time show up to play. You can do some real focused work with them and have a good season, and they can do well. And if you played UNL like right as the season ended, you might do a passable job, depending on how UNL did this year, which, it could happen. Like you might be able to kind of stand up, but if you waited a couple of months and took your foot off the gas and played them at the end of May, it would look very different because you just cannot let off. They forget. And the same would be true for this kind of stuff. Like you just cannot let off the pressure because the stuff is all around them. It is not like cocaine. It is not like methamphetamine. It's not even really like prescription drugs, although that's closer because there are prescriptions usually in most people's houses, but it's not like that. Alcohol is all over the place. And so as soon as we quit talking about it, the culture is still kind of there whispering or shrieking, depending on what's going on at the time. But if you have cable, if they're driving around, if you step outside, you're going to have contact with advertising, with other people's stories, with all of that stuff. So they're going to be hearing about it. So if we're not talking, someone else is, always. And if you let off the gas, it's going to look like a high school team against UNL because they don't have their context. Over time, it decays. So even if we do a great program for 6, 8, 12 weeks, what happens 6 months later in the middle of the summer? We look back and go, well, they did this great program. That was a long time ago. Kids are a little bit like goldfish. Like their memory is about 3 seconds. And God love them. I mean, really, I do. I love my kid. I've spent my entire career either working with kids or to improve the lives of kids. But I sometimes look at them and go, I'm not sure how you've made it this far. Because adults care about you. Probably why? Because they really kind of forget and will make some just wild decisions despite the fact that everybody's kind of poured into them kind of along the way. So time over time is a big deal. Stuff can't be learned in a second because it's always, the culture's always there, kind of whispering in their ear. So it's a very big deal to give them time over time. We have to do it. We have to do it. The second thing is, and probably here too, context changes over time, and you all know this. When little kids, like I love talking to the choir, elementary kids, it is so easy to sell them on alcohol is not good. It's the easiest talk in the world. Red Ribbon Week was the best, am I right? Like everybody who did Red Ribbon Week, all of Lancaster and Region 5's over there going, amen, like the best, most fun thing we ever did. Because all of those kids were like, yes, alcohol and drugs are bad. And we were like, yes, amen, let's all go home. And it's so easy to sell it to them because they believe it and they just want to make you happy and they get why it's bad and it all makes sense. Well, fast forward them about 7-8 years, the context has changed significantly. And what they perceive, what they know has not necessarily changed. They know all of what they know about alcohol, plus a little bit more probably if they've been paying attention at all, but the context has changed. Time has changed their context. And so how they know or what they perceive has changed. And so selling that to a 14, 15-year-old, very different deal. So those of you who work with high schoolers are probably like, yeah, Red Ribbon Week, very different deal. Some kids are still on board, not everybody. And now all of a sudden there's pushback. So the education has to take place over time because their context changes over time. And what they believe at 6 is very different from what they believe at 16. And they will have had different experiences. They will have experienced lots of things that are great, lots of things that are not so great. And so I have to be, if anything, I have to be kind of speeding up at that age as opposed to kind of letting off. And what I notice is it's a lot easier to engage when there's more marbles in that jar than there is when the jar looks like that. For lots of reasons. Partly when the jar looks like this, kids kind of start, their focus is more on their peers, less on us. They want less, our kids, the ones that live in our house, want to spend less time with us. I don't even know if our son's coming or going because he is doing so much stuff. Like the car is about the only time. So we have a 0 electronics in the car thing because that's the only time I get eyes on him and the only time we get to talk because otherwise I'm schlepping him places to and from and I never get to see him. But that's the time I have to be kind of speaking into him like I'm finished. Those marbles will be gone in a flash. He will be done in 3 years. And that's all the time I've got left. But this is the time when really every decision he makes matters. So boy, I wish this was the reverse and I had that many marbles left, but that's just not the case. And his context is changing. So the second thing is just a complete no-brainer, and you're all gonna go, are you serious? And that's love over time, which no duh. And unfortunately, it's a conversation we have to have because all of you could say, I know there are kids who are not getting that at home because they show up to our programs or they show up to our schools or they show up to whatever my context is and I just know that they're not getting it. I know they're not getting it and it's killing me. But I'm not in the right place, to be that person for them. I'm not their parent. I'm not whatever. And I get all of that. And what I love about my context now as a person in ministry is we can throw the doors open, like kick those babies off the hinges and say, y'all come, because that's what the church is here for. So I would utilize your faith communities. If you're especially from a smaller community where your faith communities are integral and you know who those people are, say kick the doors off and help us because most churches are there to do that. So use them for that because that's part of their piece and all of that. And you can say, I said so. They can call me. I'm more than happy. You can look up the number and give me a call. It's such a no-brainer. You don't need me to tell you that that's the case. But here's what I would encourage you to think about as you're working on that. Since a lot of you in here are micro and you do have your hands on kids and your hands on the lives of kids. Here's why it matters here. what do you think kids are getting? I just want to make sure I don't give away the answer. I wrote this like a crazy person. What do you think kids are getting out of it when they're drinking?
Acceptance if they're with a group.
Acceptance? That's a good answer. What else?
Escape.
What?
Escape.
Escape? What else? Fun? I'm glad someone said it. What else? Acceptance, escape, and fun. Is that it?
Numbing.
Huh?
Numbing.
Numbing? What else?
An experience.
An experience? Yeah. What else?
A high.
A high? Yeah, if it didn't work, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd all be at lunch right now. That's true. You're right. All those things are right. My question is, what are they escaping from? And why are they seeking an experience? And why do they feel like they need to drink to gain acceptance? Like, those are curious questions to me. What is going on? And sometimes the answers are obvious. Like I said earlier, you can clearly look and say, well, it's clear. You know, there's trauma, there's whatever, there's self-medicating, there's a mental health, and sometimes those answers are real clear. Not easy, but clear. But sometimes they're not as obvious, and you're thinking, well, what on earth is going on there? Like, that kid seems like they've got it all together. Why on earth would they need the acceptance of this group when it feels like they've got all these other groups? Like, what is that all about? So here's how we show love to kids when it's maybe not our context, or we're working macro or whatever. Even if you're macro, you might have kids at home. And if you have kids at home, I would encourage you to think outside the kids that you gave birth to or helped to give birth to. You can show up. There's a friend of our family, Dawson's best friend. His mom is single, and she has 3 boys. God bless her. And so she's busy. So she's working and, doing her thing with these 3 boys. And the oldest is our son's best friend, and he is something special. He's a neat kid, just real straight. And our son's a better person for knowing this kid. And because his mom's busy and she's a nurse, she misses a lot of stuff because she has to. Like, it just is what it is. And so he made the play. His 8th grade year, the first year he and Dawson were good buddies. So if you've ever been to an 8th grade play, they are 0 budget affairs. And so there's no microphones, there's no nothing, but they are huge fun. The kids work very hard on them, and they are hilarious because it's just a comedy of errors from the start to the finish. And our little buddy was Atlas. So Atlas, the guy who carries the world. So he was on stage waiting, and we went because he'd said, I'd really like you to go, and Dawson said, I really want to go watch him, and he didn't get a chance to see it in school, so we went that night. And so we get there, and all of a sudden we hear this bang across the stage, and the globe that he'd stolen from whatever history teacher goes rolling across the back of the stage, and I was like, is that Anthony's globe? And Dawson's like, yep, that's the world. He has not lived down. I'm like, you had one job. And he dies about that all the time. Like, when he walks into our house, he's like, don't even say it. Like, he's still to this day, he hasn't lived down. And I love the fact that it's like our little thing. And all we had to do was show up for this kid. And it matters to him that we show up. And we don't show up perfectly because we're busy and we miss his stuff, and we missed his jazz band concert, and we were there late and missed his, we showed up late to concert band and missed his solo and all of that stuff. And it doesn't matter. Like, it matters that you show up. So show up. And it communicates love. And love is important because it shows a sense of worth. Like, I matter to you. I matter enough to you that you showed up for something, for anything. Doesn't even matter what. Know them, which again can only happen over time. And I'm not talking about you have to write a thesis on them. I'm talking like know a couple of things about them, and not the big things, not what's in their file, but know them. Know something stupid about them. Know the fact that they can't stand One Direction or Justin Bieber. Know the fact that they love spam. Know the fact, I mean, like, know those little things that matter enough, like, because they don't matter. They matter because they don't matter. They're the little things that mean a lot to them, and the fact that you showed up enough to know, hey, I know this about you, and you matter to me because it means you see them, and they know that, and kids are good at picking up on that stuff. It's a big deal. So know them and know that little stuff about them, and then don't run away. Kids who need love the most will ask for it in the craziest, most unloving, most set fire to things way possible. And it's irritating and frustrating and law-breaking sometimes and wild. And those are the times when they need you to dig in and say, I get it, and I see you, and I know you love spam, and I'm not going to go anywhere. But you're not going to run. You're not gonna do this, and I'm in it with you for the long haul. So it's less about warm, fuzzy love, and more about I really am here for you love. When we were in the middle of this recovery program, we had a family from the Ukraine, and they had a daughter who was older and spoke very little English. The two little boys spoke English, and the daughter had some special needs, and whatever it was, she liked to run, to bolt, and she ran like a gazelle. So I wasn't chasing her because I don't run like a gazelle. So my husband ended up chasing her a lot. And she got loose one night and ran through the north entry and back into the chapel where there was a Spanish wedding being conducted. And she ran all the way up the aisle and onto the stage and said hi to the bride in Ukrainian. And so Derek kind of slides to a halt in the back of the sanctuary and is like, I got to go get her because she's up there chattering away to this Hispanic woman in Ukrainian because she's in a pretty fluffy white dress looking gorgeous. And the Hispanic pastor is like, Nova, I don't know what to do, like, come get her. So Derek kind of walks down like, hi, and grabs her, and fireman carries her out of the, like, it was just, oh my gosh, it was just absolutely crazy. And that was, like, we would get done with those nights, and I would just sit there with my head down on the desk, like, literally, like, just like this, like, I don't even know how to apologize for that, because I don't speak Spanish, and Hugo's like, I'll translate. I'm like, thanks, that's real helpful. Thank you, Hugo. I don't even know how to apologize in English for that. But that family, like, they've moved on to other things now. We still hear from them. Derek still hears from her, despite the fact that he fireman carried her out of the sanctuary. He still hears from them because I'm not running away. I'll run after you because you cannot run up into a Spanish wedding and say hello to the bride in Ukrainian, but I'm not going to run away. So that's how you do it. The third thing is words over time, and this is a big one for us as leaders and as parents, but as leaders this is huge because parents, most of you in here are parents, we spend a lot of time doing this to our kids. Don't do this, don't do that. Please pick up your shoes. Please don't pick your nose. Please say please and thank you. Please don't, don't lick the cat. It's constant litany of things that we're trying to get them to do or not to do. And sometimes you're like, well, I never thought I would ever be saying that to another human being. Cross that off my bucket list. And so parents kind of get tapped a little bit in terms of, we've run out of words today to say to our young people. And so you as people who are leaning into them from outside, educators, community leaders, church people, coalition people, have a unique opportunity to say some really great words to young kids or to not so young kids, and it can change a kid's trajectory. No joke. If you ask kids what made a difference in their life, sometimes they can pinpoint it was this one thing that one person said at the right time, and it was life-changing. And you can do that. You can do that. And I'm not talking like you have to have some profound wisdom. You don't have to be Buddha. You don't have to be Confucius. You don't have to do any of that. I'm talking about, like, what about a well-timed, I believe in you. I believe you can do this. Here's your number 2 pencil. It's NISA test day. You look about white as a sheet, and I think you've got this. It's the NISA test. Nobody's going to take you away. You're going to be fine. I believe in you. Like, that's it. I think we've all got that covered. What if you walked up to a kid and said, you're enough. You're enough exactly the way you are. You don't have to do anything else. Couldn't we all stand to hear that now and again in a world where you're never enough? Fashion magazines, The internet, like everybody is constantly telling us, you're never enough. What if you walked up to a kid once a day and just said, I think you're great. I think you're absolutely great. And I'm not talking about cream of the crop kids, because I think they hear it a lot, although they can stand to hear it too. I'm talking about kids who probably don't hear it all the time. I think you're great, because you're walking on 2 legs, or you're not walking on 2 legs, because that's great too. I think you're great. And they walk away from you going, well, that's just wild. And you'll get the eye roll, because they're conditioned to think, well, whatever, but they will hang on to that, especially if you deliver it and you mean it. So mean it if you say it. But words can change trajectory. And I know it because I'm raising a kid who's been fortunate enough to have some people say some stuff to him. He clings to that. He remembers stuff. He's had very little interaction with these folks, but he remembers the stuff they've said. It's powerful. And you can lean into kids with very little expenditure on your part, because I get we're busy. I get it. But you can do this. It doesn't take a ton of time. And you can make a huge impact. And that's the stuff that turns kids. That's the stuff that changes trajectory. The next thing is stories. Stories is a big deal because those of you who are educators, if you educate at a higher level, like beyond elementary, so middle or high school, sometimes do you hear crazy stories in the hallways on Monday mornings? Right. So Tom Workman, who used to work with NU Directions down at the university when that program was running, called the Monday morning stories for the university and talked about the impact and power of that. And like if those are the stories that kids are hearing, like of course, that becomes normative to them. And what's the power behind the stories that we affirm? And that's such a huge big deal. And we are a culture that has kind of lost touch with our stories. And I noticed that prior when I was doing prevention for Lancaster County, we would do different programs like All Stars and stuff that would like look at kids' history. It would break my heart when I would get with a group of middle school kids and ask them about like where they came from or ask about their grandparents, and they would be like, I have no idea. No idea. And sometimes it would end up that they just didn't want to talk about it because it wasn't a pretty story. But lots of times they were like, I have no clue where I come from. So we've lost touch with our history, and we've lost touch with those stories from the past, and we've lost touch with that kind of connection. And so we're looking for a story to tell. And isn't that interesting? And so what are the stories that are being told? And we as adults, and we as community, and we as coalitions, and we as all the different circles that you're a part of, what are the stories that we're affirming? And what are the stories that we're putting forward and saying, yeah, these are stories that we admire? And is it always something amazing? Because I think we need to be careful that it's not always like these wild and crazy, like the 1% of the 1%, you know, that's just nailing it. You know, sometimes it can be somebody that just did something real cool. We can affirm character. And we should be affirming character. Like, that person just opened the door for that elderly lady, and that's awesome. Nice job. And that is what I love to see. I love it when I see people do that for kids. Because it's just a little bit of a nudge, like, yes, that's what we want to see. And those should be the things that we're affirming. That should be the stuff that we're holding up as a community. And that is raising the Titanic with tweezers, because we are a culture that really... who on earth is Kim Kardashian? Where did she come from? And why is she a thing? It's weird. Like, I don't understand. Every time I see something, I'm like, who are you? Like, I don't even know where you came from. But we can change that, and we should change that. Like, what we affirm should be different from that. So stories are a big deal. So whatever your context is, look around and find the stories that we should be telling, because kids are listening, and there's a vacuum in our stories, in our cultures today. 2 more. Tribes is number 5. So tribes is where kids belong. And if you've ever, how many of you remember walking into the lunchroom your first day of high school? Is there a more terrifying moment than when you walk through those doors and you don't know anybody? Like, I just don't think there is. Huh? It was interesting. Our son goes to Southeast, and he's a pretty engaging little guy. Like, he doesn't have He doesn't have a lot of trouble meeting people, but he came home that first week of school at Southeast and was like, his demeanor just kind of was down. Like he wasn't himself. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? And he was like, I don't know anybody in my lunch. And I go, oh, bummer, dude. Like, and at the time I was like, I wasn't panicking because I was like, oh, sad day. You know, like, so we were trying to coach him, like, well, do you know any of the sophomores? Because there's lots of Berean kids that go to Southeast. He's like, I don't know anybody. And so about Wednesday, we had tears about it, which is weird for, you know, a boy that age. And so then the mama bear and Derek's like, there is nothing you can do to help. Shut up and sit down. You can only make this worse. And he was like, I'll sit on you before I let you, you know. And so we watched him kind of struggle and struggle and struggle through that. And then the second day of the next week, he was like, I finally found his group leader. His small group leader from church is a senior, and he had been gone the whole first week off campus or whatever for lunch, and found him sitting by himself, and he's like, do you want to come sit with us? He sat with a group of seniors for the first half of first semester until he got to know enough of the football players that he found other kids to sit with. And you would not believe the change in him. And I was like, wow, belonging is a big deal. Like, we didn't all know that. So if you're a part of cultures like that, it's a huge thing for kids to feel like they belong. Isolated kids are kids who are more likely to turn to behaviors that we would consider to be risky, all kinds of risky behaviors. I'm not going to isolate alcohol because that's not the only one, but it's a big deal. So if you can do anything to create traditions, big one that our culture surround is eating together, whatever it is. So having a meal together just kind of solidifies that whole thing with you belong. And then another thing that I've noticed that I love about how it's our context again, so at church, but in our small group settings for high school, each high school group always has an empty chair, always. So like if someone comes in and sits in the last chair, what I've noticed is someone will pop up and go get another chair. And so when I was watching that, like I watched two kids come in, like one kid came and sat in the last chair, somebody got up and got another chair and they opened up and put the new chair in, and then somebody else came and sat and they popped up and got another chair, and I came in, it was standing with our youth guy, and I'm like, are you guys playing a game? Because they're real quiet, it's the quietest high school game I've ever seen. Like, are y'all gonna jump up and squirt each other with easy cheese, or like what's, you know, like it's youth ministry, so you never know. And he's like, no, there's always an empty chair in every group. So that way if someone comes in, there's a seat saved. Always. There's always a seat saved so that they don't have to work. Nobody walks in and goes, I don't belong here. Like they walk in, and whether they're looking for someone that looks like them, so I find that group and I can sit in that chair, or I walk in and that's the closest chair, or I walk in and I walk to the back, there's a chair. He's like, there's a chair at every single table. And I'm like, well, that's just simply brilliant. And he was like, thank you, I stole that. All the best stuff is stolen, nice job. So save a seat. Whatever your context is, save a seat. And when they walk in, act like it's cheers. Norm, you're here! Like, brilliant, come in and sit down. There are people I know who when people walk in, they immediately feel welcome. There are some of those people sitting in this room right now. Like when you walk in, you just feel like they've been waiting for you to get there. And if you can make that happen for kids, oh, I love it. Some of those people are being affirmed right now. It's real cute. And if you can make that happen for kids, huge, big deal. Make them feel like they belong. Because they do belong, but it doesn't feel like they belong. So save a seat. Have a seat that's open, always open. And we save that seat just for you. So when you got here, great. It's time for you to sit down in your chair. We saved it just for you. The last thing is fun over time. Fun over time deepens relationships, and it sends a message to kids that you actually like me. Kids will pick up real quick if you're just dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Everybody agree? They will know their BS meters are finely tuned. And if they think you are just going along, they will write you off lickety-split. Like, it's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to all of us. Like, they just get it if you were marking time. So have fun with kids. When kids walk into, there's a guy at our church that every time somebody walks into his office, he shoots them with a Nerf dart gun. Every time. And I'm not going to tell you who. So if you ever walk into his office and he shoots you with a dart gun, you'll be like, I heard about you. But I don't want to tell you because I don't want to ruin it. So anytime anybody walks into his office, that's what he does. And everybody loves him because he's just that squirrely, and he's going to do it. If you walk in, he's going to shoot you with the dart gun. And so fun over time deepens relationships. And whatever you have to do to have fun with kids, it's a huge, big deal. And I don't care how you do it, because some people have fun in a quiet way, some people have fun in a wild way, but whatever you have to do that. One of the things I found so interesting about parenting a teenage boy, there's a girl, there's always a girl, but this girl's kind of a serious girl. And so he was like, I really like this girl, which was new for us. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm not ready for this. And he said, I'm ready. And I'm like, ready for what? I'm not ready, whatever that is. And he's like, well, I'd like to ask her out. And I'm like, dude, your life is a country song. You have no car, you have no job, you don't have a dog, you don't have any money, like you got nothing. Like, what do you think you're gonna go do? And he was like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, that's not a good plan. Like, just nobody thinks that's a good idea. And I'm like, you're not ready, for one thing. So you can go to movies and stuff, but we're gonna chaperone you, which he's not a gigantic fan of, but he's done it several times. And I'm like, so when you're old enough, you can have a car, you have a job, you can treat at least the first time, then we'll talk. But there's other stuff that has to happen for you to be ready. And he said, like, what? And I'm like, well, you have to be interesting if you want to go out. Like, otherwise you're just going to stare at each other and that will be lame. And he's like, well, what do I have to do to be interesting? And I go, this is why you're not ready. If I have to tell you, I'm like, first of all, you have to put this thing down and you have to go do stuff. Like, go out and do interesting stuff so you have an interesting life. Like, go out and have fun. And he was like, well, okay. So this is his 8th grade year. So I'm a moron because all we've done this year is schlep him places. He signed up for everything. And Derek's like, well, you're brilliant. You're fired from any more cute advice to our son. Not because I said that, but just because we were like, you have to go out and experience stuff if you want to have a life worth chatting about. You're gonna have to go out and do stuff. And it's been interesting to watch him kind of learn to have fun and to walk through this experience. And he's tried a couple things where he was like, that wasn't fun at all. I'm like, well, don't do that again. He's like, I'm not gonna. I'm like, okay, good grief, no one's holding a gun to your head. And stuff that he really has found he likes. So fun is a big deal. And go have some. I mean it when I say that, and go have fun with kids and do what they like and introduce them to what you like and just have fun, because it deepens relationships and there's no substitute for that. There's no substitute for that. Like, you cannot cultivate relationships that will help you keep kids on a path that's free from harms, or as many harms as we can keep them free from. You cannot do that in the fast lane. You cannot. And I stole that from our pastor, so please credit Brian Clark, because that was not me that said it, but he said it and I thought, that's brilliant. This stuff doesn't happen in the fast lane. And it happens over the context of time, and there's no other way for it to take place than just over time. And I'm not asking, I know that I've unpacked a lot of stuff today, and that I didn't throw a ton of numbers at you apart from at the beginning, but I think each of you is from a different community, and what's going on with alcohol looks a little bit different in each of your communities. And so I think you guys can all figure out, here's what this looks like, and this is kind of an ever-changing phase. I think we're headed in the right direction. If I was gonna say anything, I would say we can't take our foot off the gas, because if we do that, then we are gonna end up, unconditioned at the end of May, facing down the varsity UNL team or whatever. We can't take our foot off the gas. And I'm not asking you to be all of this to every kid, but every single person in here can be this person to a couple of kids. For sure, you should be this person to your kids, and you can enlist other people to help you, but you can be this person to a couple of kids. And imagine if you could enlist kids who are already kind of doing it and kind of strong to be that kid for a couple of other kids. Like, imagine what our communities would look like. I love that. And I'm so grateful to all of you for doing what you do. Nebraska would be not nearly the wonderful place that it is to live if you people were not doing what it is you do and leaning into the kids that you lean into every single day. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, as somebody who's in ministry, as someone who used to do what some of you do. All right, thank you very much.